Hey, good Monday morning, everybody. BAM Weather Meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. I hope you all are having a fantastic start to your week. We have a lot to talk about today. I am increasingly concerned about more excessive rain in the extended range. We have multiple severe weather chances that we're going to need to keep an eye on, and I actually think that that threat could continue to bump up a little bit more and more as we close out the month of April, and then additional frost and freeze threats as well. So hang in there with this video. I have a lot to cover as we go over the next couple of weeks. Let's start here with the low temperatures the next few days, guys. You can see this colder blast of air returning for the middle part of this week. Low temperatures down into the 20s across much of the northern plains, 30s into parts of the upper Midwest. As we work into Wednesday, guys, you can see frost risk all the way down to kind of the I-70 corridor here in the Ohio Valley, 20s up in the upper Midwest and in the Great Lakes. As we work into Thursday, we start to warm things back up for the middle of the country, but if you're in the eastern Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, Northeast, another decent cold shot as we work into Thursday morning with lows down into the 30s, maybe even into the upper 20s. But as we mentioned, we should be warming things up as we work later on into this week. In fact, take a look at the high temperatures as we work into Thursday and into Friday with another storm system in the cards here. We could be dealing with some record-breaking heat across the south central United States into the 90s in parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. As we work into Friday, you can see some 80s all the way up into parts of the Ohio Valley before another front swings in for your Easter weekend. Taking a look at some of the severe weather threats in the short term, guys, here's a look at the threat today across parts of the lower Ohio Valley into parts of the mid-Atlantic. You can see here looking at some possible severe weather, scattered strong to severe storms. Wind and hail are the primary threats here, but in this orange area, don't be shocked to see a couple of tornadoes, eastern Kentucky, southern Ohio, and into parts of West Virginia. Taking a look at the upper level pattern as we go throughout this week, guys, we've got this strong front that moves in behind the severe weather threat today in the short term, but then you can see as we work later on into this week, the southeast U.S. ridge will come back. Now, when you start to see this southeast ridge, that's when you have to start to be more aware of severe weather potential. And we have another front to the north. We have kind of this trough hanging out in the southwestern portion of the country. I think that along this gradient in here, guys, certainly need to be on the lookout for severe weather potential as we work into Friday of this week. And then beyond this, guys, I see this kind of eastern U.S. ridge type of deal hanging out for the foreseeable future. I wouldn't be shocked if maybe it's a touch too far east, but when you have a signal like this, it means that you're going to have a lot of moisture opportunities as we close out April, and we're going to have a lot of severe weather opportunities as well out through the end of the month. That will also come with a little bit more of a consistent warmer signal. We go out through day 7 here, again, a front around Easter, but we warm back up as we get into the week 2 time frame, especially across the central and the south central plains. And this gradient that you see here is going to favor plenty of moisture, plenty of strong storm opportunities there in the cards. Again, I wouldn't be shocked, and you can kind of see the data hinting at it towards the end, if some of the core of this warmth could come a little bit further west than currently modeled. Regardless, it's an active look out through the end of April. Here's a look at the severe weather threat as we get into Friday of this week. Right now, highest threat that we're keeping an eye on across parts of Illinois into Missouri, already kind of highlighting that as a likely severe weather risk as we work into Friday all the way through Saturday morning. I think that this could be a damaging wind threat, 70 plus mile per hour winds in there possible. Could also be dealing with multiple tornadoes in that orange area. And certainly if you're in the yellow area, need to be keeping a very close eye on this threat as well. So that's kind of a look ahead to later this week as we deal with multiple severe weather chances. With all that being said, I want to talk about the data trends over the weekend with moisture. This was the EPS from Friday for the 19th to the 24th time frame. You can see that it wasn't all that active. It didn't have a really notable signal for moisture in there aside from parts of the southern plains and the Canadian prairies. Look at how that has changed over the past 3 days. We have seen a substantial wetter trend across the southern and the southeast plains into Arkansas, Missouri, Western Kentucky, and Illinois through this area in here. Some of these areas that have been dealing with a lot of flooding and severe weather as of late. That is a notable trend over the weekend, and I think it's because the ridge in the eastern part of the country has set up a little bit further to the east. Note also some of the drier signals showing back up. When we get this type of a pattern and you get these lows and these troughs in the southwestern U.S., you tend to get moisture up here, then kind of a secondary stream here, and the risk is the central plains kind of gets skipped out. Central western plains, I think, continues to be an area that I'm concerned about maybe getting a little bit, or being maybe a little bit too far west to capitalize on some needed moisture out there. Taking a look at the EPS over the next 15 days, guys, this is a notable signal. This is a 3 to 5 inch rainfall signal in here through the next 15 days on an ensemble. That's 51 different members. That is a strong and aggressive rainfall signal out through the 28th, 29th of the month. And the GEFS supports it as well. You can see it's maybe not quite as aggressive, but in this same general area, this is a very strong heavy rainfall signal out through the next 15 days. I'm certainly concerned about these areas for additional severe weather potential and probably additional flooding and flash flooding potential. Again, a lot of these areas are already overly saturated, and certainly concerned about that risk continuing going through the end of April. Another thing that I do want to keep an eye on, as we mentioned severe weather potential, I'm noticing that our global winds are weakening. That means generally the jet stream starts to weaken. It starts to bunch up a little bit. It can favor stronger storm systems. The last time we saw a decent drop in the global winds like this, end of March, early April, when we had 2 big severe weather outbreaks. Need to really keep an eye on this time frame in here for the potential for multiple severe weather threats. And again, we're already seeing some in the short term, but as we really drop the global winds again, similar to the end of March and early April, I definitely think that there's the potential in there that we could be looking at additional outbreaks of severe weather the last 7 to 10 days of this month. Here's kind of a general overview of what we're going to expect here 19th through the 30th of the month, so the last third of April. If you're in the green area, it's likely going to be active, more active than normal. If you're in that blue area, that's where I'm most concerned about excessive rainfall and additional flooding potential in there. I think anywhere in this area is at play for severe weather threats as we go through the last third of April. So a busy pattern setting right back up as we close out this month. Taking a look at where we are at season to date in terms of tornado and wind reports. Right now, 2025 is just behind years like 2022 and 2017 for the most tornado reports at this point in the year. Now, 2011, you can see here, spiked up huge, in a huge way at the end of April. So that will probably continue to be the highest. But could we be running as the second highest back to 2010 as we close out April? I don't think that's off the table. And look at the wind reports. We're, matching 2011 basically right now in terms of the most wind reports back to 2010. So certainly has been a very busy season, and I just don't see it slowing down as things stand right now. Now, in terms of the overall picture, I want to talk about this from maybe an agriculture perspective for a little bit and look at signals for the rest of the planting season and into the start of the growing season, May into June. You look at the next 14 days, guys, again, some of those cold fronts in the short term, warming things up in the extended range. Here's how we average out through the 29th of the month. Warmer, especially across the south central U.S. and into the southeast. Some of these cold fronts to the north and in the northeast. You compare that to where we've been for the first 12 days of the month. We're probably looking at April averaging out generally cooler through the Great Lakes, but then warmer through the plains, through here, and in the southeast. I went through and I looked at a lot of different years just to try to see if we could find a year that matched closely. And to be completely honest, I don't see one that's perfect for how I think April is going to end up looking. I think that these 2 years, 11 and 12, have been our top analogs for quite some time. And if I just look at those 2 years combined for April, I could see April of 2025 averaging out somewhat similar to this. I think we probably are a little bit cooler through here, but all things considered, this is probably pretty close to how April 2025 ends up. And we've talked a lot about this. I think that subseasonally 2012 has been running very closely lately. 2011 was really good to start April. I think that these 2 years, they hit off a lot of boxes. But I want to make it very clear, I don't necessarily think that we are exactly like either of these years. I think it's kind of a mixture of the two ideas, maybe with some other years like 2006, 2021 thrown into there. And so that's something to keep in mind. But, you look at where we've been. Here's a look at precipitation versus normal. Gosh, insane signal here in the Tennessee and the lower Ohio Valley. And you look at where we're going to be the next 2 weeks compared to these years, it's very, very similar. You blend these 2 years together, and it's going to look very similar to how April of 2025 ends up. What do those years look like into May? Well, I think the risk to our current forecast would be that the core of the warmth based off these years could set up a little bit further to the east. Would be maybe a little bit of a cooler risk versus our forecast in the western plains and a little bit warmer to the east. Now, I think that maybe you factor in years like 2006 and 2021, you could bleed this back a little bit further to the west, but I want to highlight it as a potential risk. I will say this precip signal very close to our current May forecast. A little bit more active to the north and in the northeast, starting to get drier across the south central part of the country. Taking a look at some years that are similar in terms of our Southern Oscillation Index, we've been very La Nina-like through April. These years would also potentially highlight the risk that if there's a change in the May forecast, it would be that the core of the warmth could come a little bit further to the east. But again, guys, still the same type of a signal of some moisture to the north and generally a little bit drier down to the south. Maybe need to watch the Tennessee Valley that has been very, very wet. But all things considered, I would say that those are trending in the right direction in terms of our May forecast. Here's a look at the CFS forecast here, guys. It's actually nearly identical to our current May temperature outlook, just a little bit further west than those analogs in terms of above normal temperatures, and it matches quite nicely with precipitation as well. You can see northern stream, Canadian prairies, northern plains a little bit more active, but trending drier further down to the south. So seeing a lot of those signals start to show up for the month of May as things stand right now. And I think that the takeaway with that would be, number one, getting a little bit more mild, a little bit more consistently into May. But I think number two, for areas that are, excessively wet, maybe more dry time to get more planting in. For areas that are dry, maybe in the northern plains, some opportunity in there to cash in on some rains into May. Real quick before we go, I did want to look at this. This is our aridity index, typically a very good predictor of drought potential into the summer. Based on where we are at right now, the highest drought signal risk into summer is there across the western plains with that dark circled area. But there's a lot of areas that we need to monitor over the next month and a half. The southern tier of the U.S. along the Gulf Coast, up the East Coast, showing some signs of dryness. We need to keep an eye on those areas. Wouldn't take much to get dry in those areas into summer. Also need to watch for expansion of the highest drought risk signal area into more of the Midwest. So these are the areas to monitor very closely. Again, right now, in terms of drought in the Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, Tennessee Valley, not a strong signal right now. In fact, I think the moisture, while it's probably too excessive right now, it will help us out in the long term as we work into the summer. Guys, that's all I have for today's forecast. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great rest of your day.